I've learned over the last 5 years the weight cutting part, like the last couple days, I'm not the biggest fan of anymore. But the dieting and the staying disciplined, I've learned to appreciate that quite a bit, and not, you know, having to feed myself. I'm hungry, I gotta eat right now. It's like having to starve and having to be tired. And I really did learn to enjoy that, the suffering. I think that makes you a stronger person. And I think that more people in the world need to do that. Force themselves to be uncomfortable, and force themselves to have to work for things. And I just think it makes you a stronger person.
He is a legend of the game, and he produced one of the craziest knockouts to close out 2024. It is always my great pleasure to speak to a Hall of Famer, Cub Swanson. Cub, how are you?
I'm doing great. I can't complain about too many things right now.
A lifetime of great performances, a lifetime of great finishes. Where does that one rank? And not that you need to rank it, but like that was such an amazing fight, and then to cap it off that way, like, you couldn't have written a better script.
Yeah, it was definitely one that's up there with everything. With obviously my age, with it being a great fight, with it being in Tampa. The crowd started off booing me, and then they were cheering for me. So it was a good night.
Be honest with me, because like I know you go out there to put on your absolute best performance, and I know you would love to get like a 30-second knockout, because that's kind of flawless. But when it's all said and done, do you appreciate that you have to go through the fire and then get a finish like that? Because we all love it. We love to fight nights, but I know you as a fighter, you're like, actually, I'd rather not get punched in the face. So like, how do you feel about it afterwards? Because it was an amazing fight all the way through, but then to cap it off the way you did, it was like, again, it was like the perfect ending.
Well, yeah, that when you get an easy finish, it's like, oh, I want to roll right into the next one. Let's do more of those. But with this one, I did some really grueling the last two camps. So all year I was doing some real grueling conditioning routines, and I kept having to tell myself, like, listen, you're in the third round. This is gonna pay off, and boy, it did. I really needed that.
Yeah. Can I ask, like, because I'm not saying you sit around and watch it all day. How many times have you seen the knockout, or people sent you the knockout at this point?
When I was going through like my Instagram story history and stuff, like things people were sending me, or I was getting tagged on the plane when I had so much time, I probably saw the knockout close to 100 times. But I didn't actually sit down and watch the fight till I got home, and then I was able to put it on my big screen, turn it up, and listen to the commentary, and it was cool. It was cool to watch back.
There are certain guys in the sport, and I always look at kind of like the old schools. I just talked to Ben Rothwell earlier today, and I was saying that, like, out of all the years I worked in MMA, there's only a few things I've kept as far as like memorabilia, and one of them was WC. I have a WC shirt they gave to me at one of their final shows, and I always keep that because WC will always hold a special place in my heart. My mentor Ryan Bennett worked there, so I always loved that place. And there's certain fighters, like going back in the day, like I was one of the early guys who backed Carlos Condit. Like that was my guy early on. I knew he was going to be a guy. So like, as unbiased as I have to be as a journalist, I always was happy for Carlos when he did well. And I would put you on that list as well, Cub. Do you feel that from like, there's very few people in this sport that it seems like everyone has like a love for, but your success, and certainly nothing against Billy Quarantillo, seems like an incredibly nice guy, but like, do you feel that love when you go out there and have that kind of performance? It feels like the entire sport is like rooting for you in that moment.
Yeah, Billy was a hometown guy, and dude, I got to meet his dad at weigh-ins, and yeah, I feel like me and him would be totally cool if we hung out. But yeah, as far as myself, I feel like because I've kind of grown up in the sport and people have gotten to watch that, and I've always been open and honest about my journey, I think people have a soft spot for me, and I that makes me happy because I just always was trying to be myself. I was always trying to be a better person, and the sport made me who I am today. So the fans could pick up on that, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah. So now let me ask you, because you mentioned, obviously so much of the conversation going into this one was, is this possibly Cubs' last fight? Are we going to see him again? And I hear a million different reasons why guys decide to fight or not to fight, years later. When I do a podcast with Matt Brown, and when he retired, he said the reason he retired at the time he retired was he got a call from the UFC. They offered him a fight, and he just didn't get excited the way he used to. And he's like, I knew at that moment, I knew it was time, because usually he would immediately, like, he's like, I gotta get to the gym, I gotta start training, I'm just ready to go. When he got that call and he didn't get that feeling, he's like, it's time to walk away. When you have that kind of performance, that kind of just, energetic, incredible knockout, all those kind of things, can I imagine like that makes it that much harder to like contemplate, because like it's almost like, oh man, like you're not done, like you got plenty of gas left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I feel conflicted. Part of me is really excited to move on, and I got a bunch of guys I'm coaching with Bloodline, and I think they deserve a lot more of my attention. And as far as my family goes, my kids are right at that age where they're playing sports, but they're going to start being a little bit more into it. And I want to be. I don't mind taking the back seat, and I don't feel like I need to be the center of attention and just being there on the sidelines cheering them on. But at the same time, you get that thrill of the fight, and it's hard to let that go. So I'm gonna sit on this for a little while. I'm gonna think about it and spend some time with my family. And when I talk to UFC, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that, like, where you're at right now, like you're in a good spot, right? Like you're in a good spot where you kind of make your own call as far as what you want to do next. If you decide to fight again, you decide not to fight again. One guy, I love his perspective, is Joe Lozon, and Joe's like, I'm probably never going to fight again, but if the UFC came calling with some cool fight or some cool offer, or for him a chance to fight in Boston, he's like, then I'd have to consider it. Is there any
Mm-hmm.
part of you, because I know you said in other interviews, like, if they came to me with something that was like really cool, but is there also part, like when you use that word retirement, I know you said like you don't want to be a guy who waffles on that decision. You don't want to say I'm retired, and then they come and say, what about Do Ho Choi again? Or what about this? And you're like, well, okay, listen. Is that part of the reason why you don't want to just declare it, because you want to leave that door open just in case?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm done, and I don't want to be a guy that's wishy washy and coming out all the time. It's like I'm back. I think when I'm done, and so that's why I'm taking my time with it, and I'm making sure that I'm making the right decision.
Yeah, is it, because it's funny, as like we all love. Unfortunately, this, Cub. But there's so rare instances where guys walk away on a high note. Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
that's just the nature of this beast. I'm sure you remember this, whatever it was, a year or 2 years ago, when Robbie Lawler had that fight, knocks out
Uh-huh.
Nico Price, retire. It was like the perfect ending. We just unfortunately don't get that often. Usually it's the other way, where a guy loses a bad one and we're like, yeah, and he's like, I called it a career. Like, it's got to be tough though, right? Because like, as you said, you just went out there and knocked out a guy, had a fight of the night, all this kind of stuff. So it's, I'm sure the energy inside you's like, let's do it again. But then the other side is like, that's like the perfect ending, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, and that kind of. I feel the opposite of what people are saying. I feel like with an ending like that, it makes it even harder to say, yeah, maybe I'll do another one, because that made me happy. I feel less of an urge to want to jump right back in there, because that's the other thing. People don't understand how stressful fighting is. It's like I stress about waking up the next day and how I feel, and everyone texted me. My close friends and family are texting me the next day, like, "How are you feeling?" I said, 41. I feel it the next day. So yeah, I'm very happy the way things played out, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I know. And obviously your wife was around the sports. Like, she's been around MMA for a lot of years. So, I mean, I it's got to be weird too, because like, obviously, as you mentioned, like your family, you got kids. I remember when Frankie Edgar retired, he's like, now I just get to be a dad. Like, I just get to be a dad, go to their games, I think his daughter does gymnastics, things like that. But your wife also was around MMA. So like, is that all that's got to play a part, right? Like it's not just you, because as much as fighting is a individual sport, you have to be selfish in a certain way to be a fighter. You also have other factors that are playing a part in whether you fight again or not, right?
Oh, of course, and that's why I had said that I needed to get it out there, and that way I couldn't run from it. I got a lot of stuff going on. Like I said, with the bloodline, I do some commentary. Yeah, I'd like to. I'd like not to, you know, be doing this forever, and at some point I got to say, okay, when's enough? And I'm pretty content with what I have right now. I'm involved in the sport all the way through. Like you said, my wife works for the UFC. I'm cornering guys all the time. I'm going to be doing commentary, so I think that's going to help fill the void. And yeah, unless something special comes up, I think I'm good.
Do you I know you mentioned coaching guys, and I think you've said this in other interviews, you're looking forward to spending a lot of time coaching. Do you feel like when it's all said and done, you may end up being a better coach than you were a fighter when you actually have the time to dedicate that? Because you have so much knowledge, and I know you've worked with guys for years, but like when you're fighting, when you're actively fighting, you can't put all yourself into coaching because you're also getting ready for your own fight. So is there any party that's like excited to take that next step to where you could just put all of yourself into your fighters?
Oh, definitely. I'm really excited about that. I know that I could do better than I've already been doing. Um, and I think with all the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years in the rebuilding myself and, all the ups and downs, it really makes me a really good candidate to be a great coach. And I'm excited for that. And I'm excited about helping young fighters achieve their dreams and kind of grow up in front of my eyes and all the different things. It's exciting.
Yeah. And I know I think you said that you may have even said this to the post fight presser. You said, like, had the decision gone your way with the Andre Feely fight that night, you were 100% like that was probably going to be at the moment, the stage, and things like that. Can I ask, like, what was different between that one and the Quarantillo fight? Because you said very openly, like, if you had won that fight, you probably would have been completely confident saying that was it. What was different between that one and the Quarantillo fight, if I could ask?
Yeah, just a different place. It was only 6 months different, but having to go back into another camp again after I thought that might be it, and feeling even better than the camp before, having that momentum, it just made me kind of be like, man, I'm still rocking it, and then yeah, it's just it's even though it's been 6 months, it's a slightly different place in my life. So I'm I had to really think about it and take my time.
Yeah, it's got to be hard because when you love something so much, I mean, this is what you've been doing for basically your entire adult life, right? Like it's got to be weird to think about moving on from that. And also, I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but like most guys I know who fight love fighting, like you love it. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, you can't do it forever, but there is like it's got to be a weird feeling to say like, oh yeah, I'm taking that next step into something else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely an odd thing, but I've been kind of preparing for this for so long and making sure that I was trying to do all the right things. And so, yeah, I've been purposefully trying to be so busy in between fights that I would be hard for me to take a fight. And that's what's been happening. So I think it's playing out the way it's supposed to play out.
It's funny because when guys are open and saying like I'm kind of towards the tail end of my career, guys like me and I assume fans do the same thing. We're like we all want to see everyone go out on a happy note. One of my favorite quotes, I can't remember who said it first. It's been said a bunch of times. I want to retire from the sport. I don't want the sport to retire me. And
Yeah.
we think of those great memories like, George St. Pierre going out as champion. As I said, Robbie Lawler, having that great moment with Nico Price. But then the other side, when you have a great fight, people start fantasy matchmaking. Like immediately after your fight, people are hitting me up saying, "Oh, the Doo Ho Choi rematch. Let's do the Jose Aldo fight again." Do you find it funny that it's like everyone's like, "Man, we want Cub to ride off in the sunset of a great moment," but then the other side is people are like
Yeah.
immediately fantasy matchmaking for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people are always going to be like that. It's kind of funny to me because so many people are telling me don't quit now. You're crushing it. But over the last year, the amount of people that have walked up to me and said, "Oh, you retired, right? You're done." I'm like, "No, I'm actually fighting in like 3 weeks. Thanks." Like it's it's crazy how people just flip flop like that. But I've always stayed consistent, and I try not to listen to people, and I will continue not to listen to people. I'll always do what I think is best and what my family thinks is best. And yeah, this is my life and my journey, and I get to make the decisions.
Absolutely. I actually really like the Demetrius Johnson thing. I don't know if you heard what he said when he retired. He said he had his last fight, I think it was May of last year. And afterwards, he's like, he knew he was done. He knew he was pretty much done, but he's like, I want to take a year just to see if like I get that itch, I get that feeling. I really want to take a fight. Never came. And then, I think it was September. He's like, okay, I'm going to announce my retirement. And you said like, there's probably a good chance we've seen you fight for the final time, but you want to take that time. Is that a big part of it? Just like, because I think a lot of guys, and this, Cub, a lot of guys make that emotional announcement in the moment. They lay down their gloves,
Yeah.
done, and then you go home, you feel good, and you start. And then, so you said like when you make that decision, you want to be final with it, right? So that's why you're not saying I'm just walking away. Like maybe this is it, but you want to give yourself that time to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. You got to let it settle, and yeah, I think I need the time to let it settle in and figure things out and make sure that's the right decision. And yeah, everyone does things different. I feel like a lot of people want to have that big moment, and I don't really feel like I need that. I felt like I had my moment in the octagon on Saturday, and that was amazing. And when I decide that I'm done, I'll definitely announce it, and I don't think I need like it have to be in the cage or anything like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's on my terms.
I feel like I know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyways, Cub. Like, because again, when you look at the whole of your career, I mean, you did so many things. You had so many memorable fights, so many iconic moments. If this really was the last one, when you look back, and I know guys, this is stuff I do. I'm sure you don't sit around and look at your Wikipedia page all day and say, "Man, I did this and that." But if this really was it, like, can you look at your career and say, "Man, I had a freaking awesome career. Like, I had a great career."
Oh, of course. I reflect often, and you have to when you're doing it so long to be able to kind of remember where you came from and the things you overcome. And yeah, I'm very proud of myself and everything I've accomplished. It's been quite a journey. Like I said, the ups and downs. Many times did people think I was done, and I was always able to show them that I was just, taking one step backwards, but multiple steps forward after that. And um, like I said, that's why I think I'm gonna be a good coach.
Yeah, well, you always had a great nickname, Killer Cub, and I think the reason part of that, and maybe this is just me making it part of the nickname, is like you were impossible to kill. Because I remember talking to you. I want to say going into the Crone Gracie fight, you had a bit of a losing streak. Everyone at that point is like, "Oh, is Cub done? Is he going to walk away? Is he going to leave the UFC?" You go out there, you beat him, then you get back on the street. It's like Jim Miller's very much the same way. Like when Jim was having a rough time, and he was like, "Maybe I'm done." Then he got back on a streak, and now Jim Miller's got the most fights, most wins. Like that
Yeah.
attitude, that killer attitude, like you cannot be killed, Cub Swanson.
Well, I mean, and that just goes back to being easily motivated. Once I get motivated and I get creative and I get a little excited about something, I'm hard to stop. And that's something that I was born with, and I'm very appreciative of it. I'm easily motivated.
Yeah. Now, be honest though. If you don't fight again, you're going to be happy not to have to go through another weight cut. Be honest with me. You've gone through weight cuts your entire career. Like when that, like, could you, like, do you see it? Like, do you see a dessert or like a restaurant? You're like, you know what? I can finally have that guilt free.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned over the last 5 years that the weight cutting part, like the last couple days, I'm not the biggest fan of anymore. But the dieting and the staying disciplined, I've learned to appreciate that quite a bit, and not, you know, having to feed myself. I'm hungry, I gotta eat right now. It's like having to starve and having to be tired. And I really did learn to enjoy that, the suffering. I think that makes you a stronger person. And I think that more people in the world need to do that. Force themselves to be uncomfortable, and force themselves to have to work for things. And I just think it makes you a stronger person.
And also to that point, I mean, again, I know, again, this is not something, I don't know how much you actually think about this, but one of my favorite qualities about guys like yourself are the longevity, because you kind of realize that when you really start digging into people in the sport, like even great champions are kind of there and gone within like 7, 8 years. You know what I mean? To be, guys like yourself, I mentioned Jim Miller. You look at a guy like John Jones, who's been around, at the top for as long as he's been around. Longevity is a huge thing. I remember having this conversation with Frank Mir years ago, like when he was still fighting. And it's just like, you realize how hard it is to put in like a 10 or 15-year career in the UFC, or in your case, WC and UFC both together. Like, that's hard. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Like, when you look at the history of sport, like some of the greatest fighters of all time had like maybe like a 4-year window, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really do. I agree. I mean, I look at Jose Aldo and I'm like, man, this dude is just still doing his thing, and maybe it's taking a step back, but I don't care. Yeah, I think it's impressive because here's the thing that people don't think about is that the sport has evolved so much in that time span. Like when I first started fighting, the Darce didn't exist. Like the De La Hiva guard didn't exist. The Z guard, like there's so many moves that didn't even exist when I started. So it's like I had to evolve with that. And I was telling somebody the other day, like I was one of the first guys that was in an actual boxing gym. So everyone did like traditional Muay Thai. So everyone fought like this with their hands up. And then I was one of the first ones to start moving my head. And guys are like, man, he's hard to hit. It's like, well, yeah, you just move. Uh, so boxing really did become a big part of MMA until maybe like 2010s and on. Before that, everyone just did Muay Thai because boxing gyms, boxing coaches didn't really want to coach MMA fighters. So, yeah, the sports evolved so much. So, someone who's had a long career has had to evolve with it, and that takes a lot of dedication. So, the few of us that have done it, my hats off to all of them as well.
And also to that point, like the resume you put together more recently, like it's not like you've just been fighting older veterans. Like you've been fighting young guys, new guys, veterans. Like again, and I think that's also I think that speaks to UFC's matchmaking. Like they're not looking at you and saying, "Oh, we got to put Cub in there with the fight. We think he's going to win." Like you've been fighting everything. That says a lot, right? Because some guys, this sport is all about adapt or die. Like you got to adapt or die.
Yeah.
And we have seen that kind of like some of the older school fighters kind of got phased out because they didn't evolve. But you've always evolved.
Yeah, yeah, and I knew that. I always knew that you have to kind of try to stay ahead of the curve, and if you're not ahead, you need to be trying to keep up with it, and because you will fall behind. And I noticed that a long time ago when guys at the top were like, I don't even watch the pay-per-views anymore. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how could you not watch it? You're gonna get passed by because you're not seeing what's happening. You have to stay with the trends. And yeah, luckily I've stayed a fan of the sport and kept my eyes open the whole time. But yeah, I'm fortunate I was able to do that.
You've always had a really incredible mind for the sport, Cup. Can I ask, you mentioned doing commentary. Do you have any interest in maybe doing some of that with the UFC, doing like some analyst gigs? I mean, I know it's really hard to do it in the middle of your career. I think Anthony Smith might be really the only guy still kind of doing it. I mean, I know Dominic Cruz, but Dominic is, I mean, I think we all kind of know Dominic said he has one fight and he's not really been active. Is there any part of you that like maybe that would be something you'd like to explore down the road, maybe getting into some of that work? Because you have incredible knowledge of the sport. I think you'd be great at that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've done it. Some of the desk stuff. But as far as commentating, I've been doing commentating with the LFA on and off for the last couple of years, and that's actually been really fun. Doing the UFC would be wild. But I actually was enjoying doing it with the LFA, like the next the next wave of guys. I've been able to commentate for some guys that are in the UFC now, and see them early on. So yeah, it's something I definitely like doing. I love talking about the sport because I am a fight nerd at the end of the day. And yeah, and if I'm gonna get paid to talk about fighting, cool.
I think Contender Series, that'd be cool, right? Like it's kind of like the next phase, like what an LFA is, like the way you get to the UFC. I think seeing you on Contender
Yeah,
Series would be cool.
yeah, that'd be cool too. And yeah, I always like when I do my commentary, I like to talk about things that I want to talk about, and it kind of works out to be cool. I like to look at kind of the tide of the fight and when guys are starting to take over, and when guys need to, they're letting somebody back in the fight, and how you got to shut them down, ways to break people mentally. And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff I feel like I can add when I talk about fighting.
Well, I say this to you in all honesty, Cub. I always remember this story. I mentioned Carlos earlier. As I said, as a journalist, I have to be unbiased, but there's certain guys you just find yourself. It's impossible not to find yourself rooting for. But I remember, I can't remember what fight it was when Carlos fought. There was some fight he had. Maybe it was a Dan Hardy fight, and he had the knockout. And I remember jumping up out of my seat. Just my natural reaction was like excitement. Saturday night, my neighbors probably were like, "What is going on in that guy's apartment right now?" Because I jumped up and screamed, and I was like so excited and so happy for you. It was an incredible knockout, and like I said, man, you've done it all. If this is the last time we see you fight, man, you put together an incredible career, and it's been an honor to cover your entire career. I feel like I'm lucky that I was there pretty much from the beginning, and now here. But also on the other side, we get to see you fight again, man. Obviously, I'd love it. So I just love that you're in a place now where you get to make that decision, and I love that you're just, you're taking your time with it. So whatever happens, man, I'm happy for you. But yeah, my neighbors definitely heard a yelp and a scream out of me on Saturday night when you got that knockout.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know you've been around forever, and I appreciate people like yourself that have been around the sport and just watching it grow to what it's grown to. But yeah, thank you. We'll see what happens. And yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and I love all you guys out there.